Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Our participants attending this event are watching us today from the different time zones all over the world. So I'm really honored to welcome you to the 15th International Congress on Logistic and Supply Chain Systems that this time take place only, unfortunately, in virtual form at Poznań University of Technology in Poland. So on behalf of the organizing committee, I'm very pleased to announce today that we have participants all over the world, and we will also provide for you 5 distinguished presenters for our keynote speech. My name is Paulina Golińska-Dawson, and I work at the Poznań University of Technology in Poznań. I'm also co-chair together with Professor Kun-Moon Tsai from the National Kaohsiung University of Science Technology in Taiwan, the co-chair of this conference. So today's conference was supposed to be hosted in Poznań, and in fact is hosted in Poznań, our beautiful city. However, unfortunately, most of you won't be able to visit us in person right now. We prepare for you as organizing team a group of movies that help you to learn more about our university and our town. It's second time we have the honor to host ICLS Conference. The first time conference was hosted at Poznań University of Technology in 2014. This event, ICLS 2020-2021, has also honorary chairs. I'm very pleased to announce that our honorary chairs for this event is Professor Karasawa from Japan, Professor Vorotas from Thailand, and Professor Hanna Budarkiewicz-Klimek, the Dean of our department. So this conference event was unfortunately disturbed by the pandemic last year. For these reasons, we have in fact not 1, but 2 conference teams. In 2020, we distributed between our participants the call for papers under the theme Smart and Sustainable Supply Chain in Logistics: the Trends, Challenges, Method and Practices. However, the reality changed. Also the challenges that logisticians, that scientists who investigate in the area of logistic and supply chain management are facing make us to rethink and also to include a second theme for 2021 call for papers: Logistic and Supply Chain Management Challenges, Opportunities in the COVID World. Smart, agile, and sustainable trends, methods, and practices. So therefore, the presentation you will hear today will be addressing both of the topics. So we have a kind of bonus for our challenge with COVID. We have 2 themes instead of 1. So the organizers of the conference, it's the Poznań University of Technology and the International Federation of Logistic and Supply Chain Systems, who is hosting this event since 2004. So this is the 15th event in the series of ICLS conferences. So I'm very pleased to invite our first speaker, the Vice Rector for Student Affairs and Education of Poznań University of Technology, Professor Agnieszka Misztal.
Honorable Mr. President of the International Federation of Logistics and SCM Systems, Professor Kun-Moon Tsai, distinguished authorities of the Faculty of Engineering Management, and dear speakers and participants of International Congress on Logistics and SCM Systems. It's a great pleasure for Poznań University of Technology to be co-organizer of the 15th Congress on Logistics. We are happy to have the opportunity to share knowledge, experiences, and new ideas. Today, in the pandemic time, it is extremely important as we need to build and maintain relationships and networks. Poznań University of Technology is a medium-sized university. We have 2,000 employees and 15,000 students. Since 1 year, we have been the leader of the European consortium called EUNIS. As European University, we are building a common teaching and research offer together with 6 other universities. Logistics, production engineering, management engineering represent one of the 9 scientific areas at PUT. For many years, we have been the leading logistics center in the country. There are almost 9 candidates per place for the logistics studies courses. We cooperate with major production companies. I'm sure that the participation in the Congress will give you new knowledge and scientific opportunities. I regret that we are obliged to meet remotely. We cannot show you modern university and our welcoming city, Poznań. Despite this, I hope that we will have next opportunities in the future. I wish you fruitful discussions and satisfaction from attending the Logistics Congress. Good luck.
Thank you, Vice Rector, Professor Agnieszka Misztal, for being today with us and for welcoming our participants. Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be the Vice Dean for Research at the Faculty of Engineering Management at Poznań University of Technology, Professor Agnieszka Stachowiak. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished professors, authorities of Poznań University of Technology, chairs of this wonderful conference, participants and guests. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the authorities of Faculty of Engineering Management at our faculty. Well, your visit is obviously virtual, yet we are very proud to introduce you the most important facts about our faculty. The faculty is somehow a part of Poznań University of Technology from its very beginning, which is over 100 years now. It gained its independence 10 years ago when it started to operate as a Faculty of Engineering Management. Its first site was settled in the center of the city, and you can see it in the photos in black and white. And our new building is the last one, the building which we are very proud of, the building that is both modern and ecological. In that building, we conduct our research and our educational activity, which is coordinated by our Dean, Professor Hanna Włodarkiewicz-Klimek. We conduct a educational activity, which is supervised by Vice Dean Dr. Roma Marczewska-Kuźma. We cooperate with business environment and industry, and that region is supported by Professor Marcin Pleski, and naturally we conduct our scientific activity, which this conference is obviously a part of, and that is supported by me as I'm Vice Dean for Science. Our faculty is not a very big one, yet it has 3 institutes representing our scientific interests. The first one would be the Institute of Safety and Quality Management that conducts research in the field of marketing and development of organization on risk and quality management and in the area of applied economics. The institute is supported by the laboratory in economics and safety of work. The next institute is the Institute of Logistics. I think that this one would be really connected with the topics and subjects of the conference, and it includes 2 research fields: corporate economics, investments and insurances, and production and management. production management and logistics. This institute is supported by a lab that conducts simulation and optimization of logistics and other processes. The third institute is the Institute of Management and Information Systems. Well, its research fields include entrepreneurship and management in business and management systems, and this institute is supported by the lab in IT system for management. The institutes are separated, yet we conduct our research together and try to support each other in our scientific activities that cover lots of areas, as it is presented in the next slide. There you can see the map of our scientific interests, and I think that many keywords that are somehow involved in the conference are presented here as well, including supply chain management, sustainability, logistics processes, and optimization. So, though separated, we contribute to the same research areas and support each other. Scientific activity is an important part of operation of Faculty of Engineering Management, but we also have the education as a part of our activity. And here we offer to our students 3 fields of studies. That would be our next slide. Okay, we conduct classes and courses at the first and the second cycle courses. We also contribute to the third cycle studies in the field of management and quality science. For the first and second cycle studies, we offer courses in engineering management, logistics, and safety engineering. They are conducted in Polish, but also in English. For engineering management, there are courses in first and second cycle, while for logistics, it's the second cycle only. Yet I believe that opens a lot of opportunities for students, not only from Poland that want to improve their language skills and opportunity to work abroad, but also for foreign students, as they are kindly welcomed at our university. We have students from all over the world, and we are proud to exchange knowledge, experience, that are somehow local, because logistics operates locally, and global, as we all deal with global supply chain. We have foreign students at Faculty of Engineering Management that are in Erasmus programs and other international cooperations and international exchange. They're from all over the world, and I think all the continents are represented here. And we also have PhD students who continue initiate their scientific work at our faculty. So, as you can see, we try to be involved in many activities, including science, education, international projects of various kinds and types, including Erasmus Knowledge Alliance and Strategic Partnership programs. We cooperate with business environment together with our business council that involves many companies from Wielkopolska region, but also from the entire Poland. We try to offer our students opportunity to practice the practical skills that they learned during their studies, offering them internship festival. We have weekends with the entire week, actually, with Volkswagen company, and it's really strong representative of business in our region. In our strategy, we try to put internationalization in the first place, but also we focus on continuous improvement using ISO standards and our involvement in all the processes that somehow we are involved in. This is why I think we can offer you a great background for this well-known, recognized and famous scientific conference. I would like to show you our faculty, in live, in person. Naturally, now it's impossible, yet I think that you will feel really warmly welcomed here. I wish you, well, fruitful discussions, academic ambience, and climate for developing new theories and practical solutions within logistics and within supply chains management. We could experience that without logistics and without supply chains and supply chain management, contemporary world cannot operate, really cannot operate, not only efficiently, but cannot operate at all. So I do believe that this Congress will strongly contribute to the better future of economies and, well, people all over the world. All the best and congratulations for organizing this wonderful event.
Thank you to our Vice Dean for Research, Professor Agnieszka Stachowiak, for welcoming our participants and for also providing introduction to the activities, both scholarly activities and education activities at our department. Our next speaker today, it's Professor Kun-Moon Tsai for National Kaohsiung University of Science and Technology from Taiwan, who is the chairman of the International Federation of Logistics and Supply Chain System, but also who is the co-chair of this year conference. Professor Tsai, please, the floor is yours. Can you please unmute your microphone? We cannot hear you.
Right.
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Paulina. Yeah, and thank you for making this Congress, even though in virtually, it is still quite successful. As we can see from number of papers submitted. Well, dear distinguished Vice Rector, Professor Misto, and Vice Dean Stachowiak, okay, Paulina, and all the delegates, from around the world. Yeah, International Federation of Logistics and Supply Chain System is formed by the Logistics and Supply Chain Society of different countries under mutual tight relationship to encourage all the aspects and exchange of research, technology, and education. The Congress, this Congress of ICLS was first initiated in 2004 in Tokyo, Japan, followed by Congress in 2006 in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. After 17 years, we are holding the 15th Congress here, starting from the day for 2 days. And for this, I really appreciate your team. And despite the serious impact of COVID, that we cannot have a physical conference, but as the chairman, I, on behalf of IFLS, sincerely thank Professor Paulina Golinska-Dawson, I hope I pronounced it correctly, and her team, and the whole Potsdam University of Technology for making this Congress possible and realize it as good as we see today after conquering all the hindrances and difficulties. This arduous, diligent, and honored efforts deserve all of our highest respect and appreciation. Thank you so much. And it is a shame this time that we cannot visit the beautiful city of Potsdam, but we believe the beauty of Potsdam will always be there. And we can always find some time to visit Potsdam and put PUT in the future. Thank you. I wish you have a good health and have a good success for our conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Tsai, for your kind words. And of course, your invitation to Poznan is always open. So we will be happy to host you any time, and also invite all our participants to visit Poznan University of Technology to cooperate with us in the research and educational activities and student exchange, but also to visit Poland and Poznan in particular. Before we conclude with our opening ceremony, let me share with you some information about this year's conference. So as mentioned before, initially ICLS was scheduled for 2020, but due to pandemic, we rescheduled it to 2021, hoping that we will be able to welcome you at the Poznań University Technology in person. Unfortunately, the scope of pandemic was difficult to assess early in 2020, and I think many of us has misjudged, hoping that that situation, that COVID restriction, lockdown, which we have experienced both in our private lives, but also in logistics, in supply chain, when the world stopped for weeks because of lockdowns and restriction and border controls, that will be over soon. We were wrong, unfortunately, and pandemic is still with us. So I think, but also it creates an opportunity for our participants to express the research work in their publication they submitted to the conference, their assessment of the situation, what the impact the pandemic has on logistics, on supply chain operation, because it's not only limitation, it's also opportunity when we look at the explosion, a development of e-commerce, of new IT solution for logistics. It's create a lot of opportunities and speed up a lot of technologies. It's established also a new approach to work from home, to work in distributed teams. So I think we have to remember that pandemic, of course, is limitation and it's causing a lot of restriction, but also it was a strong impulse to changes and development in the logistics and supply chain. So let me just briefly sum up what is going to happen today and tomorrow during this virtual event. So I'm very happy to announce that we will have 56 presentations during our parallel sessions, and we have participants from 39 countries, including Japan, Korea, Thailand, Australia, Colombia, USA, Canada, and number of European countries like Germany, Austria, Spain, Poland. So we are really, really happy that 56 presentations and will be presented during this conference. And in total, between call for paper in 2020 and 2021, we have received almost 150 submissions, yes, exactly 149. Out of them, we have accepted 4 presentation, 100 papers related both to the call from 2020 and 21. We already have published the first volume of the conference proceeding at the end of 2020 in Springer as edited volume. And we are also going to publish the second volume of the conference proceeding under the title Smart and Sustainable Supply Chain and Logistics, Trends, Challenges, Methods and Practices, also early in 2022. We already had distributed the first volume of the proceedings as an e-book among those participants who submitted and published last year. This is not the end of our publication effort. We would like to acknowledge the effort, the contribution as our participants, and to highlight the research. So for that reason, we have also organized for you possibilities to publish in post-conference publications with a number of distinguished and high-rank associated journals, including International Journal of Logistics Research and Application, which is a SCI journal with impact factor. And then you have possibilities to submit to 2 special issues. First one on circular supply chain practices, and second on Industry 3.5 for sustainable supply chain management. But also we'll work together with the editor, Professor Leon, of the Maritime Business Review on special issue dedicated to the conference, as well as you have opportunity to publish in log forum, which is indexed in Web of Science and Scopus, and Also, additionally, it's a new, we just started now, and I'm going to announce exactly information at the closing ceremony. There will be also possibility to submit the selected papers to the special issue of sustainability, which is also impact factor journal. So it will be another possibilities to our participants. At this moment, I would like to thank you to all authors for their efforts and their patience to prepare and submit their papers. As with COVID disruption to our professional life, working virtually, teaching virtually, working in distributed teams, but also with the disruption in everyday life organization due to pandemic, I think it was really difficult to find time and also to find motivation sometimes even to prepare and conduct, to keep going with our research. So thank you very much for your contribution. It's really a value. We have received a high number of high quality submissions, and we are really pleased and honored by your contribution. And also thank you for your patience, because some of our participants who are going to present today, but also going to present tomorrow, has already submitted almost 18 months ago, yes, because the first call for papers, the deadline was in early 2020. So you have waited for almost 1.5 years to present your research during this conference. So thank you for your patience and that you are still with us and your willingness to contribute to the discussion during the parallel session and also to attend the keynote speeches. So this is the picture of Poznań, of the old market square. During the coffee breaks and also virtual lunch break, we will have a number of interesting movies and virtual tours that were prepared for the tourist board of Poznań that will at least help you to see virtually our beautiful city and encourage you to come in the future to visit in person Poznań and also Poznań University of Technology. Just few organizational matters before we move to our first keynote speech. For today, you can attend both keynote speech at 9:30, when I'm very pleased to welcome two distinguished scholars that will join us briefly. Also, after the short coffee break at 11 o'clock, you will be able to join us on Zoom. 2 parallel sessions. We have 3 parallel sessions, each of them with 6 presentations, so 18 presentations between 11 to 1:15 that will allow you to discuss different topics related to logistic and supply chain management in pandemic and also post-pandemic worlds. And then in the afternoon at 2 p.m. Polish time, Warsaw time, we invite you to another free parallel session on various topics related to optimization, to modeling, and also logistic and transport management. So now briefly, we will move to our keynote speeches. I just would like to remind you that you are watching them via YouTube, our university YouTube channel. But then for parallel session, please remember to follow your link you received from us to Zoom and to attend a bit more interactive manner our parallel session. So I'm really honored to announce that during the ICLS conference today and tomorrow, in 3 keynote sessions, you will have possibility to listen to 3 lectures of 5 distinguished scholars from different continents, which I think shows you a different perspective to some global but also local issues that we are facing in logistic and supply chain management nowadays during pandemic, which will address the opportunities and challenges which are relevant both for the research fields but also for the companies. Our first speaker today will be Professor Arkadiusz Kawa, who is the director of Research Network Łukasiewicz, Institute of Logistics and Warehousing, and he's also professor at Poznań School of Economics. He's an author of over 300 scientific and didactic publications, which are focused on logistics and in particular e-commerce. He received his PhD and habilitation in economics from the Poznań University of Economics and Business, where he previously worked as associated professor. He has delivered over 60 projects, both research and consulting projects for well-known companies such as Volkswagen, Poczta Polska, Polish Post, DHL, UPS, Deloitte, A.T. Kearney, KPMG, which focus in particular on different aspects of e-commerce. So his today's speech will focus on the sustainability in e-commerce, because I think all of us who are following, conducting research in the area of logistics and supply chain management have experienced extremely quick rise in the logistics currently during pandemic, when the customer, due to lockdown, due to limitation in access to the physical shops, moved to shopping online. But shopping online is not only convenience, it's also creating quite a lot of challenges with regard to organization of transport, of last mile deliveries, which might negatively impact our environment. That's why his speech today will focus on sustainable e-commerce. Why deal with it? So welcome, Professor Kawa, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will start with my presentation. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, at the very beginning, I would like to say thank you to organizers for inviting me to the ICLS conference, especially to the university authorities, Professor Agnieszka Misztal, Rector of Poznań University of Technology, Professor Hanna Bodarkiewicz-Klimek, Professor Agnieszka Stochowiak, Dean of Faculty of Engineering and Management, and special thanks to conference program chairs, Professor Paulina Goniska-Dawson and Professor Kunmu Tsai. For me, it's a great pleasure and honor to provide a keynote speech today. As Professor Paulina, my friend, said, so my name is Arkadiusz Kawa. I'm director of Research Network Łukasiewicz, Institute of Logistics and Warehousing. This institute is a part of research network, which consists of 32 research institutes located in 12 cities across Poland with 7,000 staff. So we are the third largest research network in Europe, so after German Fraunhofer and French Keynote. So my objective today is show, or maybe convince you, that e-commerce plays a very important role, as Paulina said, in today's economy, especially in environment. The title of my presentation is Sustainable E-commerce, Why Deal with It? In the title of my presentation is a question, so why deal companies with sustainable e-commerce? So to try to answer this question, I will show you some example. So this is Willie Sutton. So maybe do you know this gentleman? So he's an American bank robber. During his 40-year robbery career, he stole an estimated $2 million, and he spent more than half of his adult life in prison. And what is interesting, that he escaped 3 times. One day, Sutton was asked by some reporter why he robbed banks. So his reply was, because that's where the money is. So it's a very simple answer. Of course, we should not be concerned with sustainability in commerce just because of money, because this often leads to greenwashing. But sustainability should not just be a marketing gimmick, but should be first and foremost stem from a concern for our environment and society. So the structure of my presentation is as follows. So first of all, I will talk about motivation of my presentation. Afterwards, I will present the issue of e-commerce. I show you some statistics and trends. So I will do some brief introduction to e-commerce. So in the next part, e-commerce challenges for logistics will be given, and then I will approach sustainable e-commerce issue. Finally, obviously, I will conclude my presentation. So let's start with motivation. So the internet has significantly changed business activity, which can be developed in any place. So as Paulina said, so during the pandemic, so we can buy our products so without go out home, and so it's very easy and very convenient. And the phenomenon of e-commerce is omnipresent and has had very big impact of many areas of economy. So one of the biggest challenge for e-commerce is obviously logistics, because our conference is about logistics, and there is very strict relations between e-commerce and logistics, especially when we talk about delivery time and cost. So logistics supports the majority of operational processes in online retail, especially helps meet the high expectation of customers, because today online customers are very demanding, and so they suspect a lot of additional services. So logistics is very close to is very close related to ecology, because transport of other goods, packagings, returns, and so on. So that is more and more talk about sustainability in e-commerce, and it's not clear whether the impact of e-commerce on ecology is positive or negative. So I will try to show you some different perspective today. So this pie is very interesting. It shows what happens every minute on the internet in this year. These numbers are huge and make an amazing impression. For example, 69 million texts by WhatsApp on Messenger, almost 200 million emails sent in each minute. And for us, the most interesting thing is this green piece. So on the left, people spend about $1.6 million in every minute. So it's very impressive. And so I hope that I have very well argued my motivation for my presentation. So now let's move to the e-commerce. So there are about 61% of the internet users in the world. The number of mobile phone users are more than 5 billion. So it's a very huge number. And top smartphone users spend about 4.5 hours per day on mobile internet. So it's very, very a long time. And e-commerce is one of the most dynamic and important sectors of the economy, as I said. And it creates new opportunities for expansion on a larger scale for already existing entities, so companies, and offer prospects for rapid development for emerging ones. So e-commerce sales in the world in last year increased by approximately 27%. So thanks to pandemic, compared with the previous year, and amounted about $4.3 trillion. So it's about 16% of total retail sales. So the share is quite high. And by 2021, the global sale via the internet is even expected to reach almost $5 trillion. As I said earlier, so global e-commerce sale amounted to more than $4 trillion worldwide last year. As you can see on this slide, so this number is expected to continue growing over the next few years. And for example, in this year, so the number is projected to about $5 trillion, and 2024 it will be about 6.4. So this is also possible thanks to the development of the coronavirus pandemic, unfortunately. So we know the online shopping is one of the most popular online activities worldwide. Now I will talk about e-commerce challenges for logistics. So please look at this slide and this photo. So that is what the landscape in China looks like after the world's largest sales festival and a single day in China, obviously. It generated more than several billion orders only in several days. So exactly 150 billion US dollars and 2.3 billion orders in last year, only in Alibaba and JD.com, so the largest marketplaces in China. So it's a very huge number. And a lot of packaging and people waiting in a long queue for their orders. So as you can see, so there are a lot of packagings, a lot of goods and a lot of people. So it's quite impressive. So this is photo from Poland. So parcels are waiting for customers before lockers, so because they are full. And in the peak season, so before Christmas time, so I think that we can observe such situation in a lot of countries and a lot of places. So now some information about e-commerce challenges for logistics. So in commerce, so B2C segment dominates, in which goods are ordered by individual customers. So customers often make one-off purchases in small quantities. So the challenges is the high variability of demand, causing problem in proper planning of work. So because there is seasonality, Christmas peak, accumulation of orders during the day, and a lot of things that is very difficult for logistics managers. And logistics needs varied due to the increasing diversity of products, because we buy books, clothing, household appliances, so with different wide size, value. And now, for example, we buy some things like swings, grills, pergolas, and other huge things. There are different delivery times for individuals and companies, because when companies work, so it's difficult to find individuals at home because they work at the office. There are also different delivery places for such customers, so because they usually live in locations that are difficult to reach or far from the center. Customers expect different forms of delivery and great flexibility in this respect, because they want to deliver to at home, to parcel lockers, pick up and drop off the points and other places. And customers are increasingly becoming omni-channel. So what does it mean? So one day they go to the shop and buy the products, but the another day, so they browse the internet and they order online. So in the same with the delivery, because they can choose different delivery method, as I said. Customers are looking forward to free return and expect that it will be easy. So customers are more and more interested in receiving real information about the status of order processing and shipping. And what is interesting, especially during the pandemic, so expectation for same day and even super fast deliveries are growing. For example, services provided by gorillas like Uber, like Bolt, Volt, and other startups companies. And what is the most interesting for us, for our presentation today, so is customers pay more and more attention to ecological aspects of logistics, so especially transport and packaging. So I would like to talk about the next point of my presentation and show you why sustainability is important in e-commerce. So with the dynamic development of e-commerce, the scale of challenges for logistics is growing. So as I show you on the last slide, only in last year, online orders generated approximately 125 billion packages, so which translated into a similar number of shipments being driven, billions of kilometers and millions of tons of packaging materials being used. So it's very, very large number. Each product must be completed, packed, shipped, and handed over for collection by customers. So although online shopping is very convenient for customers, So it can have a negative impact on the environment, especially if e-commerce is not properly sustainable. So that's why we talk about sustainability in e-commerce. The problem obviously lies with the transportation of individual shipments, additional packagings, and material use for this purpose, and especially returns. For this reason, so it's claimed that rapid and continuous growth in e-commerce cannot be discussed without talking about sustainability. So that's why I'm very happy that more and more people and more publications are about sustainability in e-commerce. So the explosive growth of the commerce sectors raises the question of its role in the global concept of sustainability, sustainable development. So generally, sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So in the case of sustainability e-commerce, so it's quite similar because we talk about management of physical products and information about these products, and cooperation between different companies from value network, because value network consists of obviously retailers, so some logistics companies, fulfillment companies, and some suppliers and other entities. And obviously we talk about three dimensions of sustainable development. So it's economic, environmental, and social. So that's why when we talk about eco approach in e-commerce, so we have to remember about economic and social issues. To be green or not to be green, so it's a question. So obviously online shoppers are increasingly interested in a sustainable approach. So they expect not only the social responsibility from companies, but they also want to take some initiatives that are related to ecology, especially young people. They try to be more eco. According to the Green Generation report provided by Mobile Institute, many customers are willing to wait longer for the delivery if it is due to the store care for greener delivery and pay extra for foil-free packaging. So it's quite interesting that customers want to do that. However, there are still many customers who have the opposite attitude. So this report also shows that almost 3/3 of Poles surveyed do not know what ecological means. So it's terrible. And 1/3 believe that the global climate is not getting warmer. So it's even alarming. And so it's a similar dichotomy is shown by the result of last McKinsey study. So the study shows that some clients are able to pay this go green, even up to 5% more. But obviously there are some customers who don't want to pay extra for sustainable solutions. So as you can see, some customers want to be more eco and pay for that, but some customers want to be eco but without any paying for that. This is indicative of still low awareness and relatively low commitment of the public to sustainability, even that they have increasing expectation in this field. So this problem with development of ecological attitudes is above all convenience, because still a large part of Poles and other people from other countries so treat the pro-ecological approach as an additional effort in which they do not see direct benefits. So moreover, e-commerce stimulates customers to make additional, sometimes unreflected purchases. So something like impulse purchase, because, for example, we have some time, so during the weekend, and for example, we buy some products, but without any plan that earlier that we wanted to buy this product. So as I said earlier, so there are two most important things, last mile and packaging. So maybe last mile, sorry. So it's the last stage of the process of delivering the shipment to recipe. So it's the critical point of the entire supply chain. And what is interesting that is very cost consuming, because according to Frost and Sullivan, so the last mile logistics in last year so reached more than $10 trillion. So it's interesting that 70% of this money so was generated by transport, and 40% of which in the last mile. So it's a huge amount of money which should be optimized. That's why at the very beginning of my presentation, I talk about Willis Sutton bank robber. So in addition to very high financial costs, so there are many social costs associated with urban supplies, for example, traffic jams, noises, pollutions, which are caused a lot of courier companies on our streets. And in addition, not all couriers obey traffic regulations and directly damage our nature, so it's our landscape. And obviously, last mile is the most important phase of the delivery process from the sender to customers. So that's why it should be optimized and it should be do better. So because there are some solutions which help to solve this problem. So for example, it's a good communication. So sometimes adapting the delivery time to time at which the recipe can be found at place of residence, for example, afternoon or evening hours, development of click and collect. So IDM solution, so it's dynamic change of the place and time of shipment collection. Development of parcel lockers is very, very popular in Poland, but in other countries, especially in Sweden and Norway, and development of pickup and drop-off points. So it's a product. So for example, as you can see on this slide, so it's very, very good alternative to door-to-door deliveries, which is less sustainable. And what is interesting, because almost 100% of out-of-home deliveries, so to parcel machines and PUDOs, so are made the first time. So it's very, very important. And where the prerequisite density exists, they are close to the customer and are convenient, because we can pick up the package on our way, or if not, the access point is very close to our home. So for example, we can pick up our package, for example, when we come back our home after work. So it's very, very good solution. So obviously we can use bicycles, scooters, and even boats. So it's example from London. So every morning, package arriving at Heathrow Airport and transported to a dock on Thames by electric vehicles. Afterwards, they speed down to river to London, when they are unloaded and placed on cargo bikes for delivery to the final destination in the city. So the same solution is used in, for example, Venice and Amsterdam and other places. So obviously there are other new solutions of the last mile problems. So for example, car trunk deliveries. So for example, thanks to use special keys or smart lockers, so we can deliver package to our cars or even to our garage. Obviously, there are some personalized lockers. On the next slide, I will show you some examples of that. Drones, robots, sharing economy. So it's quite popular and quite sustainable, because we can use, especially when we deliver the same day in the city, so we can deliver more than one package. Parcel unlockers. So you can observe on this slide. So car trunks, so in garage, and personalized lockers, or robots, drones, and sharing economy. So there are solutions that can solve the problem of last mile. And obviously parcel lockers on wheels. So maybe it's some future solutions, but so maybe in some time, so we will observe some parcel lockers on wheels. So it's quite nice solution. And a very good example of last mile problem mitigation, so is the concept of micro hubs or micro depots or hubs. So there are places to which shipment are transported by some bigger truck. These shipments are then distributed to customers by couriers on bicycles, motorbikes, and so on. Such hubs are shared by competitive companies. For example, here's an example from Hamburg and Dortmund, but there is the same with, for example, in Prague and other countries, in other cities. So I hope that we will see such solution in our country, so in Poland sometime. So now I would like to talk about packaging. So as I said earlier, so it's one of the biggest challenge in logistics e-commerce. So generally packing should be used to store products. So it has protective marketing and informational function. but in many cases it is used in improperly way. So packaging is not aesthetic, so dirty or damaged boxes. Packaging is difficult to open because packaging is covered with several layers of foils, so it's terrible. So there is something like, as I call, matryoshka effect, so packaging in packaging in packaging. So I show you some example. Next slide. There are too much plastic fillers, packaging which make return impossible. And so here is an example of my last online purchase. So I bought an electric vacuum, so it's iRobot, in one of the Polish internet stores. I was very surprised to see that it was triple packed and full of fillers. So as you can see on this slide, as I said, it seems like a matryoshka. I have problem now with this moment because I didn't know what to do with 3 cartons. It's definitely not an ecological approach. So here you can see many other bad examples of how products that are sent to customers should not be packed. So you can see a lot of empty spaces, for example, here, some small letter in the package, and unnecessary fillers, so like here, and some mismatched product sizes, unaesthetic packaging, like here. So majority of customers don't like vastly oversized box full of plastic. According to them, it's not. It is eco-friendly phase. So very often they make a photo and put it on social media, for example, Instagram or Facebook. So it's quite normal. So on this slide, you can see a good example of sustainable packaging. So more eco-friendly fillings are cardboard fragments. For example, some stores use aesthetic materials giving a higher quality filling. So they are, for example, use paper shavings or eco-wood wool. A good solution is paper sticky tape, for example, like here. And obviously, customers have a lot of expectation to returnable packaging. So it's quite new trend. So it can be disposable, reusable. So not only once, but many times. So such packagings contain a hot melt return label, and it's quite interesting. And for example, my institute, so is providing some projects. So it's a e-pack that is intelligent packaging, which is reusable, and we can a lot of times, so we can deliver packages in this package. Is e-commerce more green? So it's not obvious answer to this question. Of course, the question so is quite difficult, as I said, but there are some research, for example, research of Oliver Wyman and University of St. Gallen, so which show that online shopping is more between 1.5 and even 3 times more sustainable in the most frequent scenarios. So, for example, when we buy only one product in normal shop, so the offline emits even 3 to 6 times more emission than online shopping. So this slide shows the average CO2 emission generated by e-commerce. On the left, you can see e-commerce. On the right side, so we can see offline shopping. And for example, the biggest difference between those two channels, so is building energy consumption, because in the case of e-commerce, so it's only 160 grams, but in the case of e-commerce offline shopping, so it's almost 1,200. Last mile transportation, so in the case of e-commerce, so it's only, and it's quite surprising, it's about 200, but for customer driving, so in the physical, from the physical store is even 600 grams. And obviously only in the case of e-commerce, so because there is additional packaging, but it's about extra 114 grams per package. So as you can see, e-commerce so is more eco, but obviously according to this research, so that's why I think that we need other examples and other research. So that's why our institute tried to do something more in this material, because it's not obvious. So finally, I would like to conclude my presentation. So e-commerce has a very big impact on many areas of the economy. And thanks to the internet, customers who have access all the time to information about sellers and their products, also benefits, so they can easily find offers, so they can compare these offers with the other user opinions. So, for example, they can watch some photos from bad packaging. E-commerce is obviously very promising, but has to face some challenges, as I said, especially in logistics. And so obviously, logistics helps to meet high expectation of e-commerce customers, I said. And e-commerce has an impact on ecology, but the balance of this impact is positive. So according to research that I show you, so the biggest polluter of e-commerce is packaging and material in packing, and eco-friendly solution required efforts, and obviously they required money. And however, greenwashing should be avoided because consumers are very sensitive to it and they know exactly that is greenwashing. And answering to the question from the beginning of the presentation, one deal companies with sustainable e-commerce. So I can say because the quality of our life or our future generation depends on it. So that's why you have to deal with it. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me.
Thank you, Professor Kawa, for interesting presentation about if e-commerce can be sustainable and what issues are changing. We have a question I would like to ask you. It's about Recommerce. So about, for example, reselling used product online. What do you think? It's an important trend nowadays, or we are not still there? It's just some sort of niche activities?
So it's a very good question because obviously I didn't have time to talk about e-commerce, but it's one of the most important trends. So not only in Poland, but especially in the US and in Germany, and I think that a lot of countries. So because especially young people want to buy some used products because they care about more about ecology, so that's why they look for some used products. And according to a lot of research, so we can expect even 30% of growing in the next year. So that's why, so even in the fashion industry, because there are some regulation, so even some expect that in the finish of the end of this decade, so the half of production half of selling of new products would be half of selling of used products. So that's why it's quite interesting. Obviously, so it's very difficult for logistics because we have to to transport some products from C to C, because in normal e-commerce there is B2C from some company to customers, but in the case of Recommerce, so very often, so people directly say sell the products, for example, using Vinted or Leaks and Allegro, local in Poland, and other solution. And one thing that is related to Recommerce, maybe it's not Recommerce, but it's quite close to Recommerce. So it's rental. It's quite popular because people, for example, want to. So they need, for example, some special dress because, for example, they go for some special events tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Or, for example, women, so they want to buy, for example, some new one. So that's why they can rental some new dress for only one night, and so it's quite cheap and some quite effective. But obviously, so we have to use logistics in this case.
Thank you very much. And just one more question. I think we can just try to squeeze it in before your presentation is over. So it's about money, yes, because companies often talk about money, and we have seen on your presentation pictures, examples of some new solutions which are shared with the logo of, for example, DHL or UPS, yes, from different countries. But how in this can find themselves, for example, small, medium-sized companies? Can they afford to be more eco-friendly when doing e-commerce, or will it be impossible or close to impossible for them? What do you think?
Yeah, so it's a very good question because, as we know, so big companies have big money, so that's quite easy to do eco solutions. And obviously, some micro and small and medium companies so have problem with that. But obviously, as I show you, during my presentation. So there are last mile solutions. For example, if you use parcel lockers and put the deliveries, so it's not because it's provided by some logistics providers, for example. So that's a good solution that you offer not only door-to-door deliveries with courier companies, but you add some new, some maybe not new, but some additional services, because it's quite popular in Poland, but it's not obvious, for example, in Germany, France, and other countries. But so it's very important that during the checkout in the online shops that you add some additional methods to delivery. So PUDO, so pick up drop-off points, and parcel lockers, because it's a lot of companies offer such solutions. So it's one of the some that in this case you don't have to use a lot of money, but the other solution, obviously, in the case of package, so it's more tricky, because if you want to be more eco, so you have to pay for that. So obviously, for example, paper tape is about 2 or 3 more expensive than plastic foil tape, but it's more effective, and it's easier to separate, different cartons and tapes and so on. So, but impressive is quite important, and according to our survey, so there is a strict correlation between eco-friendly solution and satisfaction of customers and their loyalty. So customers looks that retailers, so is very eco, so it's something nice for customers, and there is very high possibility that he come back and buy more and more products. But obviously there is need some investment, but now obviously, because from the pandemic reasons, so obviously cartons are very expensive, because e-commerce is booming. But obviously you can use some, maybe less foil, plastic foils, but more, some cardboard paper.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your presentation with us and for your keynote speech. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to express our appreciation for you, and thank you for being today with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice conference. Bye.
Bye, thank you. And now I would like to introduce our second keynote speaker today, Professor Erwin Pesch, who is professor at the Faculty of Economic and Business at the University, Business Administration at the University of Siegen. Professor Pesch has a PhD in mathematics and habilitation in business administration, both from the Technical University in Darmstadt. His research area are logistics, decision support, project management, and scheduling. And he's author of 6 books, and he's published over 200 papers in many international top journals. He's himself on the editorial board of the Omega journal, which is CCSI Impact Factor journal. He is a big friend of Poznań University of Technology and has, I think, Professor Pesch, 30 years of history of collaboration with Poznań University of Technology, especially in area of operation research. He's also a winner of the prestigious Copernicus Award for Polish-German cooperation in the research in science. He also holds a Science Award of German Operation Research Society. So I'm very honored that Professor Pesch has accepted our invitation and will today deliver the presentation. The presentation today will focus on seaport container handling and conflict-free crane scheduling. So welcome, Professor Pesch, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paulina. Now I want to share my screen. Can you give me the right to share the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I should be able to share the screen. Okay.
Yes, we can see it perfectly now.
I don't want to do it. Okay. So this is the beginning. So thank you very much, Paulina, for this nice introduction. And many thanks for inviting me to give a keynote talk at this conference. It is an honor and a great pleasure to do that. Unfortunately, we are not having this conference in presence. I would have liked to come to Poznan again. And as you mentioned, I have close ties to Poznan and have been to the city 70, 80, maybe even 90 times. So I know the city very well. It's a beautiful city. And I can recommend everybody going there whenever there is an opportunity to come to Europe. If you are in Europe, it is worth going to Poznan and to see the city and to meet the friendly people there. So Mr. Professor Kava already gave a nice presentation today that showed the need of an efficient handling of containers at seaports, but not only at seaports, but also at transshipment yards. But today I will only talk about seaports. And as Paulina already said, the title of my presentation is Seaport Container Handling and Conflict-Free Grain Scheduling. So the outline of my presentation is, first I will talk about the problem setting, about automated container terminals, the terminal layouts, yard layouts, container flow, and yard crane systems. I hope you can see my mouse here. Then I will talk about twin cranes, but probably I have to cut this part a little bit because I'm a little bit late in time. So probably I have to cut this part a little bit, and the policies that we are using in this twin crane case. And then I will come to crossover grain scheduling, and I will go into detail with crossover grain scheduling, describe a solution approach, logistics-based, that is based on logistics-based vendor decomposition, and finally, you will see some computational results. So what is the problem setting? We have a container terminal layout that looks as follows. You have the waterside area where vessels are moored at the berths and K cranes are used to load and to unload containers. There is a landside area that handles the hinterland container transportation on trucks and to trains and from trucks. And there are also some internal vehicles that bring containers to the hinterland area. And in the middle, there is a storage yard, and the storage yard contains containers temporarily stored in blocks of containers. So it is a large number of blocks. I don't know exactly how many blocks there are in Hamburg. I should know because we are collaborating with Hamburg for already a couple of years. And I heard the numbers a few times, but anyway, I forgot them. There are, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 blocks where the containers are stacked temporarily before they are either loaded to the vessel or going to the hinterland or going to a long-time storage area. And there is a waterside transfer area, which is here. It is operated by internal vehicles, for instance, straddle carriers, automated guided vehicles, trucks, reach stackers, forklifts, and so on. And it performs a container transport from the waterside area, from the vessel, or from a small buffer next to the berth cranes to the storage yard or to the blocks of the storage yard. And there is a landside transfer area where containers are picked up and delivered to external trucks, to internal vehicles, as I said before, to internal vehicles that bring the containers to transshipment yards, or to trains, or to a long-time storage area. So this is the outline, and here you can see a picture once more of the whole flow of containers. You have the vessel here, the K cranes or the berth cranes unloads the vessel and drops the containers in Hamburg on automated guided vehicles. There is no buffer here, but at other places there is a small buffer here of a couple of containers. And these containers are picked up by reach stackers, forklifts, and so on. But in Hamburg, in the automated container terminal, an automated guided vehicle is picking up the container. This container is immediately dropped on the automated guided vehicle. And then it is brought to one of the blocks of the storage yard. And these blocks are usually operated by 2 cranes. And these 2 bars here illustrate the crane. So this higher bar shows that a crane is bigger than the smaller crane. And we have the situation in such a case that we speak of crossover cranes, and the bigger crane usually can go over the smaller crane, no matter whether the smaller crane is operating in a bay. A bay means here a column of containers, a short column of containers, not the long column of containers. So not the column of containers that is perpendicular to the water side, but the column of containers that is parallel to the water side. That is called a bay. So the larger crane can overrun the smaller crane, or the smaller crane can go under the larger crane, but only if the larger crane is not operating in a bay. That means the larger crane is not picking up or dropping a container in a bay. From there, containers are moved to external or internal trucks, as I mentioned before, and then they go to trains, long-time storage areas, or other places. And this is the container movement from the vessel to the hinterland, but there is also an opposite container flow from the hinterland through the storage areas to the vessel again. And as you can see, there are many optimization problems, and many optimization problems that can be proved to be NP-hard in the strong sense even. For instance, the loading and unloading of the vessel is a difficult problem. You cannot pick up the containers one by one, because you have to take into account the weight of the containers. And if you take them one by one from the front to the back, then the vessel will tilt, and you have big difficulties to get access to the last containers. And the other thing is, it matters how you stack the containers on the vessel, because not the vessel is completely unloaded in a seaport. It has several stops on a trip, for instance, from Hamburg to Shanghai. It has several trips in between, and therefore it matters where the containers are stacked that have to be unloaded in the next harbor. Then there is a scheduling. Of course, there is also the scheduling of the berth cranes, but then there is a scheduling of the automated guided vehicles or the forklifts or ridge stackers that are used there. And then you have the problem of stacking the containers and scheduling the cranes in these container blocks or in the storage yards. So the automated vehicles do not only go between the vessel and one container blocks, they can go between the vessel and several container blocks. Usually several container blocks are responsible for capturing unloaded containers from the vessel or delivering containers for the vessel. So from that point of view, it is a complex scheduling problem that you have to solve here as well. And then scheduling of the trucks, of the internal, external trucks is also a difficult problem. And of course, the scheduling of the transshipment yards and consolidation of the trains is another difficult problem. We over the last couple of years, we dealt with a couple of these problems here that I just mentioned, not with scheduling the berth cranes, but almost all others. But today I will focus only on scheduling the cranes in the container block. This is my focus here for this presentation. In the ideal case, we would be able to combine such a solution to an overall good solution or optimal solution, but it is very hard, even if we are able to solve each subproblem to optimality. And there is always the hope that if you have good solutions or optimal solutions for subproblems and you combine them, you find good solutions for the overall problem. It's not guaranteed, but it is at least the hope. So let me say anything about the yard layout. There is a European layout and there is an Asian layout. In the European layout, you have the water side here, and the container blocks are perpendicular to the water side. So the short length of the container block is in parallel to the water side, and the long length is perpendicular to the water side. And as I said, the short length is a bay that is considered, that is said to be a bay. In the Asian layout, they are turned around by 90 degrees. There are good reasons for both layouts. I don't know the reason why the European layout is mainly found in Europe and the Asian layout is mainly found in Asia. But of course, I understand the names for it because they are mainly found in these different areas. But I don't know the origin, but for both layouts, there are good reasons. And optimization approaches are not exactly cannot exactly be adapted to the other layout, but they can be adapted with small changes. There are different yard crane systems. There are rail-mounted gantry cranes or yard cranes and rubber-tired gantry cranes. Rubber-tired gantry cranes, you can see one in this picture here. They are moving on wheels and they can go over a block of containers if the block is not stacked too high. So the height, it can be 5 or 6 containers at most, as far as I know. And sometimes they are stacked up to 8. And if they go up to 8, then it is more difficult for them. The big advantage of the rubber-tired gantry cranes, they can freely move around. They are not fixed to container blocks. They can move to another container block. And they need a driver, of course, but they can always move to another place and need not stay where they are assigned. The rail-mounted gantry cranes are operating on a rail track and they are fixed to the container blocks. They cannot move to another place. They are fixed to the rail track where they are moving. They are usually half automatic. So you need an operator there, but you need not have an operator for everything. So we are looking here at the rail-mounted gantry cranes and not at the rubber-tired gantry cranes. And of course, what I said, there can also be the situation that you have reach stackers and forklifts that are transporting containers between the vessel and between the long-term storage area and the temporary storage area with forklifts and reach stackers. And the situation there is that you have different speed compared to automated guided vehicles that have always the same speed, whether they are empty or loaded. But these transporters have different speed. If they are loaded, they cannot go as quickly as if they are empty, because if you have a forklift with a heavy load and it has to brake in an emergency case, then there can be difficulties to fall over. So this is more difficult. And we considered this case not in Hamburg, in another harbor, and we tried to balance the workload of the transporters, of the reach stackers and forklifts. We tried to balance the workload. So it finally led to a min-max weighted matching problem, which is difficult to solve. Here you see examples of these forklifts, and you see examples of the loads that they are carrying. But we focus here on the automated guided vehicles. But if you are interested in the work about the reach stackers, we published some papers in European Journal of Operational Research, 2 papers about it. With solution methods, with complexity results, and especially with complexity results of the min-max weighted matching problem, and we showed the non-approximability in this paper that is published in Discrete Applied Mathematics. But we will focus on rail-mounted gantry cranes here now and automated guided vehicles that are bringing the containers to the container blocks, and the rail-mounted gantry cranes will pick them up. There are the cases with twin cranes. Twin cranes operate on the same level, so the 2 dark bars are the 2 cranes, and they can move in this direction here, so they can move from bay to bay. And they cannot overtake each other. They are operating on the same rail track and cannot overtake each other. And you have to pay attention that they do not interfere whenever they interact, because also this crane can go to areas, to bays that are accessible for the upper crane here. Then the second case is the crossover or dual cranes. The crossover or dual cranes, there you have the situation, as I mentioned before, you have a larger crane on a different rail track and a smaller crane on an inner rail track, and the smaller crane can go under the larger crane as long as the larger crane is not operating in the bay, and the larger crane can always pass the smaller crane whenever even if the smaller grain is working, and it doesn't matter if the larger grain is carrying a container or not, the larger grain is able to pull up the container or move it to the side so that the larger grain is able to pass the smaller grain, so that both grains in that case have access to all the base of the container block, which is not the case for the twin grains. And there is a situation of triple grains, but I don't know only one paper where triple grains are considered by a paper by Dorndorf and Schneider. The triple grains consist of the situation that you have two twin grains and one larger grain on a different rail track, and the larger grain can run over the two smaller grains. So as I said, we consider twin grains and crossover grains here. There's some literature about twin grains, for instance, Kress and Yen and Dornzeifer and Yen published two papers in discrete applied mathematics and in eJur about complexity results for twin grains and some solution methods, for instance, a dynamic programming approach for the twin grains, where they assume that they want to minimize the make span, or in other words, they want to keep the dwell time of the vessel as short as possible. This is the overall objective that has to be considered first. And they only assume that containers are unloaded from the vessel and go into the container block, and from there, they are transported further by the second grain of the container block to the hinterland or to some trucks, trains, that internal vehicles that pick up the container. So there is a container flow from the vessel to the hinterland, but no opposite container flow. And now I will talk about a paper that we published in Networks, but I briefly talk about this paper because I ran out of time. I cannot go into details with this paper. It is about twin grains, where we make the following assumption. We assume that we have R base here from 0 to R, and we have two grains operating on the same level. Grain 1 has a base bay 0, and grain 2 has a base bay R+1. The base bay is a bay that doesn't really exist. It is a place where containers are received by grain 1, respectively by grain 2, in their base position. And whenever they deliver containers, they also drop these containers to base 0 or to base 2. So the automated guided vehicle is going there, delivering the container, or it is dropped there by a forklift, delivering the container, or the other way around. We assume here that we only import containers, so we have only inbound request. Containers can be brought from the left and can be brought from the right. So this is more relevant for the Asian layout than for the European layout. So we assume that containers are only brought into the block, but we do not remove containers from the block. The same is applicable if you remove containers from the block only. This assumption is quite reasonable. Also, later on, I will relax this assumption, but the assumption is quite reasonable because you can assume that some of the container blocks are dedicated to only inbound requests and others are only dedicated to outbound requests, so that you can optimize these container blocks with the inbound requests in a certain way and with the outbound requests as well. So how would it work? Assume there is a container brought to base 0 to the base bay, or to bay R+1 to the base bay of the grain 2. And then assume the loading time would be 2 time units. The grain would load this container, then move to another bay, drop off the container there, go back to the base, and so on, and continues like that. And the same with the other grain. The other grain would pick up the container at its base, bring the container to a place where it is dropped off, goes back to the base and continues like that. So it is always important whenever one grain goes very deep in the area of the other one, that the other one is not higher than this area. So it is the other one cannot go there at the same time. So the other one could go there in this bay at a time, but only if the grain number 1 would be far away. So there is also a certain safety distance, we call it B, and the safety distance assures that the two grains will not collide. And we can assume for our solution approaches that B is equals to 0, that there is only that there's no empty bay in between, so that the two grains can go to neighbor bays, and the solution can easily be transformed to a situation where B is larger than 0. And you can also easily see if you are able to bring containers from both sides, and you can decide from which side the container is delivered to the container block, that it will never happen a situation like that one grain goes very far, very deep in the area of the second grain and drops off a container here, but the second grain would have a situation not necessarily at the same time, but would have a situation, for instance, here, where, or it is shown here, where a container is brought into the area of the first grain, which is closer to the first grain than to the second grain. In that case, you would swap the two containers and reassign. You would assign this container here to the other grain and this container to that grain and get a better solution. This is one possibility of one of the policies, because you can imagine 5 different policies that can appear. And the 5 different policies are the following. So containers are assigned to the grains according to these 5 policies, and we use the scheduling notation, the 3-field scheduling notation to describe the situation. The first field is always the environment. We consider 2 grains, so C2 is always the first field. The last field is the objective. Cmax, we minimize the make span, so the time when a set of containers are handled is finished as handling. And in between is our policy. Fix means we have 2 sets of containers assigned to the 2 grains. So one set of containers goes to base 1 and has to be handled by grain 1, and one set of containers goes to base 2 and has to be handled by grain 2. And the sequence of the containers that are arriving at each bay is fixed. It cannot be modified. The other policy is dedicated. So there is a set of dedicated containers assigned to base 1 and to base 2, or to the 2 grains, grain 1 and grain 2. But the sequence how the containers arrive at the 2 positions is not fixed. The third policy would be one sequence is fixed and the other one is arbitrary. So a mix of these 2 situations. The fourth policy is you have one flow of containers, but the sequence is not fixed, and you can assign any container to any of the 2 bays at any time. And the last policy would be global fix. It means you have a fixed sequence and you can assign any container of the sequence to any bay, but you have to observe the order of the sequence. You can only take the containers one by one. So these are the 5 policies, and we analyzed the complexity. Briscoe and Angeloutis proved already that the fix policy is polynomial solvable in O of n to the power of 4 time. N is the number of containers. The policy with dedicated containers, but no sequence fixed, has been proved by Erdogan to be NP hard, but they only proved ordinary NP hardness. We proved the strong NP hardness. The third policy, fix any, has been proved to be a strong NP hard by Boyson, Briscoe, and Emder, but they proved that for A equal B equals 0. I haven't mentioned what is A. A is the time that is needed to drop off a container or to pick up of a container by the spreader. That takes much more time than moving the whole crane from one bay to the next bay. So A is considered to be a multiple of the time that is needed to move the crane from one bay to the next bay. And I explained B already before. B is a safety distance, and they assumed A equal B equals 0 and proved NP hardness, but we generalized the proof and could prove a little bit more stronger results. And there's the remaining 2 policies, and we considered the remaining 2 policies, but we were not able to prove their complexity status. We don't know if they are NP hard or not, so this is an open question, and maybe somebody is interested to work on it. So as I mentioned before, if you have the 2 grains, one on the left, one on the right, it will never happen. You can assume that it will never happen that and this policy where you are completely flexible and can assign any container to any grain, that the most right position of the left grain is more right than the most left position of the right grain. So RJ is the position, so the bay where container J is dropped off. So if you have that, then you can order the containers by bay. So you order the containers according to the bay where they are dropped from 1 to R, and then you have a separation number K somewhere, and you have to find the optimal separation number. So you have a separation number K, which is a bay, and you assign the containers a container that it goes to some bay, and the containers 1 to K are assigned to grain 1, and the containers K plus 1 to N are assigned to grain B. So the question is, where is this K? So you can calculate this K, but then the question is, if you don't have a conflict and you calculate this K, then you have an optimal solution. But if you have a conflict, then the question is how to resolve this conflict. And you can resolve this conflict by introducing some waiting time for one of the grains. So you start the grain a little bit later. So if a grain is already operating in a bay where a container is to be dropped, and as the other grain also wants to drop a container in this particular bay, so the grain that arrives later there should start a little bit later, and the time that the other grain should start later is A plus 1 at most A plus 1, because this is the time that the first grain needs at most in order to leave this bay, and that the other grain can enter this bay. But the question is which grain to delay and by which amount. This is not completely clear, and therefore this solution is not necessarily optimal. So we relax this procedure, we allowed meeting, and then if we allow meetings of the two grains in a certain bay, of course you have a conflict, but this is only for theoretical purpose, and then you can solve this problem in O of n log n time, and then you introduce these delays. You let a grain start a little bit later in order to resolve this delays. And if you do that, you get a 3/2 approximation with this approach. But now, and something similar is possible if you have a global fixed, you get some similar results if you have a global fixed sequence. But now let me go to the more practical approach. We have two grains, crossover grains. Grain number 1 is larger than grain number 2. Grain number 1 can overtake grain number 2, and grain number 2 can go under grain number 1 if grain number 1 is not operating. This paper was published in Transportation Science. My co-authors are Jenny Norsag and Dirk Briscom. We consider the European layout, and we have different requests. We have transportation requests that arise from the water side and from the land side area and have to be handled by the yard grains. Each transportation request defines an origin and a destination. We know from the practitioners that origin pickup place and destination drop-off place is known. So the bay is known, it is calculated in advance. So people from Hamburg told us that. An inbound request is initially located at the water side or the land side transfer area and has to be transported to the predefined yard location. An outbound request starts at the well-defined position in the storage yard. It means in our case, we consider only a container block. In the container block, it has to be transported to the water side or the land side area. And moreover, we have housekeeping requests that are handled inside of the storage yard in order to improve storage locations. They are done, for instance, in less busy periods where containers that go to the land side and are still near to the water side in the block are further moved to the land side, so that only one crane is needed in order to drop this container on a truck or on another vehicle. And the same for those containers that go to the water side but still are closer to the land side area. And of course, sometimes reshuffling is necessary to get access to deeper containers that are blocked by containers that are not immediately going to the vessel that is currently moored at the quay. So there are a couple of housekeeping requests that are needed additionally to the inbound and outbound requests. So as I said, we consider dual grains and we consider a single yard block. These dual grains are operating on different rail tracks, and interference may occur, but of course it has to be avoided. And our question is as the following. We call this problem the crossover grain scheduling problem. It evaluates in which order, this is the grain routing, and by which grain, which is a grain as a container dispatching, the transportation requests are carried out such that grain interference, that means a conflict-free grain scheduling are prevented. So the conflict-free grain scheduling is achieved and interference is prevented. And the make span, the time when all the containers are handled and finished, is minimized. The problem is strongly NP-hard, and we proved it by reduction to 3 partition. But I will not talk about the complexity. I will talk about a solution approach, and we solved it by decomposition. So we first solved the dispatch and routing problem, and then the conflict-free scheduling problem. So the master problem is the dispatch and routing problem. So the dispatch and routing problem evaluates in which order and by which grain the requests are conducted. And then if you have an assignment of the containers to the grains and the sequencing of the grain moves with the assigned containers, then you might end up in conflicts that the grains are operating in the same bay at the same time, and then the sub-problems assures that there is a conflict-free schedule at the end. And the sub-problem is solved by adding logic-based Benders decompositions, logic-based Benders constraints, sorry. Let me give you an example. Look at a storage area with 8 bays, and there is an outer grain that starts in bay 1 and an inner grain that starts in bay 8. So we assume that we have 3 requests. The origin location is the bay here. For the first request, it is bay 3. The pickup time of the container takes 1 time unit. The container is to be brought to bay 5, and dropping off takes 1 time unit. For the second request, we have the situation that the container is to be picked up in bay 3. Picking up takes 1 time unit and has to be brought to bay 5. And it takes 2 time units to drop off the container. And that's the same for the third request. And now assume the master problem, the assignment of the containers to the grains and the sequencing of the grain moves with the containers resulted in the following: that request 1 and 3 were assigned to the outer grain, and the request 2 is assigned to the inner grain. And now assume additionally that the outer grain performs first the request 1 and then request 2. So you have the following solution. As I said, the outer grain starts in bay number 1. The outer grain goes first to bay number 3. This is a request here. Needs 1 time unit to pick up the container. Moves to bay number 5. Needs 1 time unit to drop off the container. And then from bay number 5 goes to bay number 4 to satisfy the third request. So goes down 1 bay, needs 2 time units to pick up the container, and has to carry the container to bay 3 and needs 2 time units to drop it off. And then the grain is done. And the inner grain starts in bay 8, goes to bay 3, picks up the container, which takes 1 time unit, and then goes to bay 5 and drops off the container, which takes 3 time units, and then this inner grain is done. So this is a schedule, and you see 2 positions where are possible conflicts. The question is, are there any grain interference? And if you look carefully, you see not in both positions there is an interference. There is only an interference in this position, because in this position here, the smaller grain can go under the bigger grain, because the bigger grain, the larger grain, is not operating, only carrying. So there is no conflict in this situation, but there is a conflict in this situation. The larger grain started dropping off the container, picking up the container here. Yes, picking up the container here. So this bay is blocked, and the smaller grain wants to cross here. It's not possible. The solution would be to let the smaller grain wait until the larger grain is done. And then when the larger grain is done, the larger grain continues to base 3, and the smaller grain can also continue. So this is the idea. So such a solution here would be provided by the subproblem. So you have the master problem that does the dispatching and routing, and you need not be able to read that. I will explain it in a minute. So the dispatch and routing problem is solved by the larger grain. The master problem solves the dispatch and routing problem, and the subproblem, the conflict-free grain schedule, is solved in the subproblem. And therefore, we need the logic-based Bender's constraints. And let me introduce a model to you. And the model is as follows. We have 2 grains. We have a yard base. We have transportation requests R. We have an origin location and destination location. We have an initial starting location of grain K. We have a service time at the origin location of the request. We have a service time at the destination location of the request. We have a travel time from the destination of request I to the pickup place of request J. So this is the empty travel time of the grain, but we also have a full travel time of the grain, TII, which means from the pickup place to the drop-off place. And we have decision variables Yijk. Yijk is equal to 1 if request J is conducted after request I by grain K, and it is 0 otherwise, and W is the make span, and we would like to minimize the make spans. And we have the following constraints in the master problem. So the first constraint set basically said that each grain starts in its initial location. This initial location is defined here as a request to make it more easier. Then the second set of constraints makes sure that each request is served. So here the third set of constraints are the flow conservation constraints. The fourth set of constraints assure that there are subtours eliminated. These are the subtour elimination constraints, and there is an exponential number of them. And the last one guarantees that the make span is correct. It means if request J follows request I, then the contribution is the loaded transportation time from pickup place in I to drop-off place in I to the plus the empty transportation time from the drop-off place I to the pickup place J plus the 2 service times, and the definition of the domains. So this is the idea. So if we have a solution for the master problem, then we get a certain value in this solution, and then we use these results of the master problem and try to find the feasible make span. And this feasible make span, this minimum make span that cannot cannot be reduced, is considered here to be W hat. So Priscon and Angeloudis provided a method for, if the master problem is solved, for finding this feasible solution. And this method is based on an idea of ACAS for solving job shop scheduling problems with 2 jobs and an arbitrary number of machines. It is a graphical method, and it runs in A of n to the power of 4 time. So we use this method, and so if you calculate a make span of W in the master problem, and then have the solution and give it to the subproblem, and the subproblem tells you W in the H situation, W hat H is the right solution, and W hat H is not larger than W, then you are optimal. But if it is larger than W, then you know the solutions that you found, so the Y's that you found in the master problem, are not all correct. So you introduce this logic-based Bender's constraints, and one of the Y variables, at least one, has to take the value 0. And this constraint forces that one of the variables takes the value 0. We did some computational study, implemented everything in C++ and use Cplex And we considered 15 requests. We considered 15, requests and 20 requests at the beginning. Here we have the inbound, outbound, and housekeeping requests. The lower bound in the root of our search tree, the objective values that we obtained, and the CPU time. Here you can see the summary, the bounds. The bounds are excellent, as you can see from the modeling. The number of subtour elimination constraints that we added, because at the beginning we assumed there are no subtour elimination constraints. There's an exponential number. Whenever there was one violated, we added them. So the number of subtour elimination constraints added are listed here, and the number of logic-based Benders constraints are listed here. So for the 15 requests, we could solve all of them to optimality within a good time. For the 20 requests, we were not able to solve all of them in 1 hour. Then we checked larger instances and gave only 10 seconds with 30 requests and 40 requests. These were the results that we obtained, and added it and decreased it to 60 seconds, and we could improve almost everything. And here you can see again, we are very close with the lower bound to the optimal solution. So the model seems to be excellent in our case. And the same with 40 requests, we could find really good solutions. And we compared our results to other results by other people from Fiss and Rothberg. They used 2 different simulated annealing approach. I'm not explaining exactly what they did, but they used 2 different approaches. And with 20 requests and 30 requests, the runtime was 60 seconds. And we compared our results to their results. They obtained in 2 situations, in only 2 cases, here in this case, and in 3 cases, better solutions. In all the other cases, we had the better solutions. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry that I exceeded a little bit the time.
Professor Tesch, thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you have time for just 1 or 2 quick questions.
Sure.
Could you just maybe comment what happened with the damaged containers, how they are handled, and how they influence the problem you are considering?
This is a very good question with damaged containers, because I haven't mentioned that because of the time. It is currently situation that we are dealing with in Hamburg, because it is a separate optimization area. So among these containers that are unloaded from the vessel, they are always damaged containers. Some of them are filled, some of them are empty. The empty containers are not stacked between all the other containers, but first they go also in the storage area, but then they go to different areas, and each empty container is inspected and has to be maintained. Either it has to be repaired or at least washed, and then goes into the process again. Some of the full containers are emptied at the harbor. Most of the containers go to some trucks and trains and are brought to the customer, but some of the full containers are emptied at the harbor, and then they are empty, and then they are also inspected. So this is an important other aspect that has to be taken into account. And in general, stacking containers that are empty among the full containers is a difficult problem. They have to be separated as much as possible, because if you have an empty container at the bottom and 5 heavy containers on top of it, then the empty containers will be damaged. And the other thing is also containers that have a different function. For instance, open top containers that have a different size and they cannot be easily stacked like the others, or reefer containers that need a cooling. If you need a cooling and the reefer containers is not empty, then it cannot easily brought to such a container block. It needs a special location where there is access to electricity available. If the reefer containers are empty, then it is not a big problem. They can be stacked there. And the other thing, if the reefer containers are damaged, they need an extra treatment, because in the reefer container, not only the container, the floor, the roof, and the walls are considered whether they are damaged or not and need to be repaired, but also the machinery is maintained. So they need some extra work. And we did not treat the situation here. But in Hamburg, it is the case that try to separate empty containers as much as possible. And later on, empty containers are stacked at different areas.
And what happens with the containers of different owners? For example, Hapag-Lloyd, Evergreen, are they handled separately, or how does it look?
Yes, this is also a very good question. Usually, you would assume that they are handled separately. Actually, at the beginning, they are not handled separately. They go into the container block. Nobody cares about whether there is an Evergreen container or a Costco container or Hapag-Lloyd. But later on, when there are empty containers to be handled, they are tried to be kept together. It doesn't mean that there are only Evergreen containers kept together, but they try to keep them together in order to make it easier for the access. And of course, whenever there is a demand for empty containers, they prefer to have their own containers. If Hapag-Lloyd wants to have containers, new empty containers, they want to have their own containers, and they do not prefer to have Evergreen containers or Costco containers. So from that point of view, it is important, not at the beginning in the handling in the blocks, but later on when the containers are empty, that the empty containers that belong to the same company are also stacked together or nearby.
Thank you very much for the discussion and for interesting presentations. And I would like, so thank you very much for being today with us. Let me just share the screen.
Thank you very much. So it was a pleasure to give this presentation. I really enjoyed it. Of course, it would have been nicer to meet all people in presence. And if anybody of those who are listening, thank you for those who listened. I don't know how many there are, but if anybody is interested in any of the papers or some other papers that I did not list here, or in contact or possible collaboration, please contact me.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and experience with the participant and inviting to collaboration. And I just wanted to mention that Professor Pesch was one of the most distinguished scholars in area of operation research, especially with area of scheduling in Europe. So I'm really honored that you are today with us, and just a small virtual sign of token of appreciation, the certificate, but of course, I hope our cooperation will continue, and thank you very much for your support to our conference, to ICLS. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I also hope for continuous cooperation. And I think from next year on, we will be able to travel again more intensively.
We all hope for that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite our participants for a coffee break. I will just to announce that the session, parallel session, will take place on Zoom at 11:15. Yes, so please take your time for your coffee break, and just please join our transmission on Zoom for the parallel session. As mentioned before, we have three parallel sessions, 6 presentations each. So please follow the Zoom link you can find in your emails from our organizing committee, and we will proceed with the parallel session at 11:15. Yes, at 11:15. And thank you very much again for being with us this morning in Europe and this afternoon or evening in Asia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Pesch.